So Washington wins its fourth game of the season, 41-16, currently on top of the division in the NFC East. But again, so many, as Jerry Jones looked on in frustration, wondering what in the world was going on with some of those decisions. And so here is Ed Werder, who covers the Cowboys for us so well. A very happy Thanksgiving, Ed, to you. And as you watched those, the way the Cowboys handled that game yesterday, what was your reaction?
Well, Mike, I think with all the injuries, especially, to Dak Prescott and some of the offensive linemen, the Cowboys clearly have a pronounced lack of talent, and that's exaggerated by the fact that they were so obviously poorly coached in a game where, if they win, they're in first place, and they have a significant schedule advantage the remainder of the season over their competition in the NFC East. I thought Mike McCarthy coached in a manner that afforded his team absolutely no chance. I can't recall a higher number of bewildering coaching decisions in a game where McCarthy's team is playing close with first place in the division on the line. A fake punt from early in the fourth quarter, down by 4 points, their own 24, and that's after a 4th and 10 when they failed with a pass from their backup quarterback to a rookie wide receiver rather than using their $90 million running back on 4th and 1 from their own 34 with the game tied in the second quarter. They fail both times, give up touchdowns immediately. It was as if McCarthy was coaching with a team that had a big talent disadvantage against a dominant opponent like the Chiefs, not a 3-win team like Washington.
That's extremely well said. I agree with every word you just said. So if this thing does go where it now appears as though it will, it's been a terrible season. And look, the Cowboys had an awful tragedy within their organization this week. They lose their quarterback early. They've had a variety of injuries. But they are in a bad situation, and they now look like they're in significant danger of not winning what will be the worst division probably ever. Jerry Jones has proven to be pretty patient in recent years. What do you expect the fallout to be?
Well, I think Mike McCarthy in this pandemic has been fortunate, Mike, in one regard, and that is the media covering games hasn't had its normal access to the owner and general manager of the franchise. Typically Jerry Jones comes out of the locker room following a game like this and addresses, dozens of members of the media for a long period of time. He's obviously the game's just ended. He's in an emotional state. We get an awful lot of honesty out of him. He hasn't been able to critique his coach in that format this year, because the only time Jerry Jones has been available to give his opinion on the state of the Cowboys is during his radio shows, which he does on his own team's radio network twice a week here in Dallas. So we really don't know. But I do not think that Mike McCarthy is going to be a one-and-done coach, if that's what you're asking, simply because Jerry's paying Mike McCarthy an awful lot of money. I don't see him firing a coach after a single year, paying that coach for 4 more years, then paying that staff plus the next staff for 4+ years, in effect paying 2 entire coaching staffs for that period of time. I just don't see that happening. I think there are too many excuses that McCarthy can point to, and that Jerry will use that to give McCarthy at least 1 more year.
Okay, Edward, always all over this. Thank you so much for your candor this morning, Ed. Again, a happy Thanksgiving to you and your family. I'll see you soon. And Stephen A. Smith will join us later in this program to talk more about the Cowboys. Meanwhile, today is a day filled with monster college football games. First off, we got a Big 12 matchup between ranked teams. Number 13, Iowa State, and number 17, Texas. A win for the Cyclones would mark their first time beating both Texas and Oklahoma in the same season in school history. We've got Oregon State tonight. This is the 124th meeting, the most played series west of the Mississippi. The Ducks seeking their first 4-0 start since 2014. And then, sandwiched in between, this game with all the implications. Number 2 Notre Dame facing number 19 North Carolina. Fighting Irish have won 14 straight, the longest active streak in the FBS. And for this, let's bring in Sanchez with us this morning. And Paul and Heather, good to get up with us here again on this day after Thanksgiving. Thank you both for doing that. And I want to start, Paul, with you. I feel like I've heard this game for a while, weeks now, described as, here's a spot where Notre Dame could lose. Does this look to you like a game, a dangerous spot for Notre Dame today in Chapel Hill?
Absolutely. Remember, last year, Clemson, the number 1 team in the country, went into this very same stadium and probably should have lost. You mentioned bad plays. Mack Brown had one of the worst 2-point conversions I've ever seen. But Mack Brown has done a brilliant job of getting this team to a higher level. They've lost some strange games this year. North Carolina got in the top 5. They blew a game at Florida State, which is inexplicable. They lost another game later against Virginia. But they're primed for this game, and I think Notre Dame ought to be on major upset alert.
You're one of many I've heard say that. So, Heather, let's come to you. No one covers the CFP committee more closely than you do. How would you describe what is at stake for Notre Dame today, considering they probably still have a date with Clemson in front of them?
Well, that's the thing, Greeny. If this were any other year, I would say Notre Dame has to win this game. But it's 2020, and Notre Dame is in the ACC. So even if they lose this game, I still think they'll finish in the top 4 if they win out and beat Clemson to win the ACC championship game. Now, if they lose, though, that puts the pressure on them to do exactly that and win out, no more mistakes down the road.
Right. That's what I was thinking, is that maybe in this case, the significant piece is that the reverse is true, Heather, that if they win today, if they win out and they go into that Clemson game unbeaten, so long as they don't get blown out with Trevor Lawrence, maybe Notre Dame gets in whether they win or lose that last game. That's the way I was looking at it, Heather. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, Greeny, yes, especially as they sit there at 2-3 right now. But remember, the SEC also has a chance to get 2 teams in if Florida wins the East and beats Alabama. And if you're asking me now which conference has a better chance to get 2 teams in the top 4 in the end, I would say it's the SEC, simply because on Tuesday, the selection committee put 4 SEC teams in its top 10, so it's clear they hold them in very high regard.
All right, so now we know what the stakes are. Sanchez, let's talk about the game. What are you keeping an eye on today, Notre Dame, North Carolina?
It's funny you ask, Greeny. Forgive me for looking at my notes from October 24th. This is for Notre Dame. These are my notes on Notre Dame. They're averaging 261 yards a game on the ground, close to 6 yards a carry. But no wide receiver on their team has more than 7 receptions this year. That's what I wrote down for a Saturday game. We had Notre Dame on ABC. But now, I said it on Saturday. I said Ian Book doesn't have enough juice for this team to win. They're going to need to throw balls. They're going to need to throw touchdowns and move the ball down the field in the air. He must have heard me. He must be a fan of ABC or Get Up or whatever it is, but I issued a public apology to the kid because he's found big number 11, Skoranek. This kid is outrageous. He throws him 50-50 balls regularly, and he comes down with them almost 100% of the time. It's incredible what he's done and transformed his game. Credit to Tommy Rees. Credit to their head coach. This has been an amazing run for them. I think it's going to be a barn burner, but I think Notre Dame comes out on top.
Skoranek is a graduate transfer from Northwestern. Okay, now let's go to another game that has very different stakes. Penn State, Michigan. This is a game that when the season began, we would have circled and said, wow, this should have absolutely everything in the world riding on it. Paul, what is riding on Penn State, Michigan today?
I think it's more important for Jim Harbaugh, because what has Jim Harbaugh done lately? He's embarrassed himself, he's embarrassed his program, and he's become the most prominent coach in America on the hot seat. Meanwhile, James Franklin has had a miserable season, but let's say it again, it's 2020. But don't forget James Franklin has had 3 11-win seasons at Penn State, including a Rose Bowl appearance a couple of years ago. He's lost some key players, so I think he'll get a pass. I think Jim Harbaugh has burned all of his passes up.
Heather, what is your sense? What are you hearing from those, particularly in Ann Arbor? What is your sense of the way things may be headed there?
Well, obviously, it's extremely difficult to recruit when you have the 1 year left on your contract. It expires 3 days after next season. That is a very tricky spot to be when you're a coach. But I think these are 2 extremely different situations. I mean, Jim Harbaugh's job is in question. James Franklin's is not, and nor should it be, for every reason that Paul pointed out. You've got to remember, Journey Brown, Noah Cain, Micah Parsons. They have a new offensive coordinator, no spring ball. This is 2020, and it's an anomaly at Penn State.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. Again, Michigan coming off a weekend in which they celebrated a triple overtime win against Rutgers is just not exactly the way they foresaw their season. And so we will leave it there. Guys, a happy Thanksgiving, Paul and Heather. Thank you for always being there whenever we need you. And enjoy the games today. We've got them coming your way, starting on ABC at noon Eastern. Again, Texas, Iowa State. Then comes the Notre Dame, Carolina game. Both of those are on ABC. And then tonight, prime time, it's Oregon and Oregon State. And you can